I think sometimes when we take away the lights, camera, action, and we don't feel like the world is peering into that moment, and you're not writing with the audience in mind, then it just comes out. But once you start to sit down and say, okay, this is going to be the next published title, I need to make sure, oh gosh, it's like wringing a dry cloth and trying to get some liquid out. It's not great.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to our interview series. Today, I am super happy and privileged to have on the show with us a friend of mine, Puno Selesho. So, just a short introduction before I hand over to Puno. Puno is a poet, a performer, an entrepreneur, which is probably the best combination in a career type skill set I have ever read. On the poet side, she specializes in spoken word, has over a decade's worth of stories, poems that are meant for both personal and public spaces. By the way, if you, while you're listening to Puno and you want to get in contact with her, everything's in the description down below, so you can just go straight to that. She's also an accomplished business person and an entrepreneur, creating meaningful impact through various types of business ventures. We can ask Puno all about that. And then finally, Puno is also quite the agent for transformation, both on a societal and individual level. Um, I met Puno about 3 years ago over coffee in Pretoria, and most recently reconnected at TEDx Pretoria, where I was a speaker with Puno. She was in the audience, and I was so appreciative of that. But since then, we have stayed loosely in contact on matters such as communication, brand, story, creativity, all kinds of related things. I think this is for our audience, but Puno, to you as well. I think what has impressed me most about watching your career unfold from a distance, that sounds super, I don't hope it comes across too patronizing, but I mean it in the best way, is just with how much empathy, discernment, and a clarity have managed to just forge your path. And I know when you stay in contact over social media or over a distance, it's not always the real, right? But this is what I observed. And then what has also inspired me greatly is just your acute ability to observe and reframe what you're observing in such a super interesting and illuminating way. So I don't know if that ever was your intention, but that's my impression of you. And I'm sure everybody that's following along, their impression of you as well. But that's enough from me. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, Maynard. This is such an honor and a privilege to be able to come and share on this platform. Always relish an opportunity to kind of reflect and sit and have creative conversations.
So you were a Pretoria native, or you are, but you moved and you relocated. Where are you finding yourself now?
So I'm currently in the northern part of KZN in a small town called Mtunzini, which I absolutely love, and I'm enjoying my time here. Yeah, bucket loads.
Oh, perfect. So I want to just get right into the thick of things with this one specific question. So you have what I think is a composite career. It has these seemingly opposing things at the extremes of it, and somewhere in the middle, where you hold on to the tension of those two things: art and creativity, and business and entrepreneurial things, and corporateness. You hold that tension really beautifully, but at some point you probably had to make a serious decision about where to go. I know you have a legal background, as myself. I know we share that as well. But talk to us a little bit. What was probably the most crucial decision you ever had to make that just put you on this path? And talk us through a little bit of the decision making process. What were some of the emotions and the fears involved with that? I know there's a lot of people watching, myself included, who also had to or still have to make those decisions. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, I mean, this decision was almost like, like, if you think of waves in the ocean, they start from way back thousands of kilometers until eventually they crash on the shore. So it had been coming for quite some time, throughout my high school career, just the decision of what subjects do I take? And then, what do I eventually study at university? And I landed, doing law, BA law and LLB, which I absolutely loved. I really enjoyed it. Maybe it's also the people and the justice side in me, the love for words essentially that allowed me to do that. But after university, I needed to decide, am I going to pursue this legal career now? Am I going to do my articles at least? Or am I going to make room for all the things you've mentioned, whether it's the entrepreneurial side, to play, to ponder, to experiment in that space, the poetry which had already started. Am I going to have to choose one of those different pursuits? Do I do a combo? There was a variety of sort of alternatives and options there. I had to
Yes.
kind of sit and be like, we keep saying, no, choose these set of subjects and you'll do what you love later, or choose this degree and you'll do what you love later. Choose this
Mm.
career, you'll do what you love later. And that was the progression of conversations that had been happening all my life. And I then decided, okay, cool, I'm going to give this a shot. I sent out my CV to a bunch of different places, and I landed one interview at a law firm, small to medium sized law firm in Victoria. And I remember standing there looking in the mirror as I was getting dressed. And I'm quite a religious person. So I was like, God, if I get this interview, I know that I'm supposed to at least do my articles. If I don't get it, I'm out of here. Then I'm gonna try everything else. And I'm gonna almost rip open Pandora's box and see what lands. Went for the interview. I was incredibly nervous. You're obviously thinking a whole bunch of things of like, how are you going to pave your way? If you are like financially, how are you going to support yourself? And there's one line that the interviewer said to me that made me know that that wasn't the right place for me. He said that everything that I described when answering my questions, everything that I put forward, made it seem like I had this very or overly grandiose view of myself that kind of
Sure.
seemed a little bit unrealistic. And he wasn't quite sure where I was going with all of this. That was a sucker punch to the gut because obviously in that moment you are the lesser than in terms of a power dynamic, and somebody who's lived life, who's accomplished, is sitting across from you telling you who you are, who you are not, and what you're capable of essentially. Went home. My family had like a pre-Christmas lunch, and at the pre-Christmas lunch that very day, I got the email to say I was an unsuccessful candidate. And even though I didn't really want the job, I was super disappointed, obviously.
Yes.
But it is that sort of disappointment, feeling crushed, that kind of settled it for me. That knowing of like, actually, this is not where I'm going. This is not what I want. And I can go into this world of possibilities of the unknown and make room for the creativity, for the entrepreneurship, and see what sticks.
That makes 100% sense to me. I don't know if this is a good thing to say, but I am so glad you did not get that job. Like,
Thank
in
you. Me too.
retrospect, probably we wouldn't have had everything that you've contributed to this world, probably if it wasn't for that. Or maybe you would have. Maybe your path was always destined to go this way.
Oh, that's a very good point. We never
So,
know how the
okay.
dice falls.
So, all right. So connecting with that, tell us a little bit just about your career story. Just give us the overview. Sometimes, as a creative, especially as a professional creative, there are not necessarily laid out career paths like there is with lawyers or accountants or engineers or architects. So, how did your career path play out? And what are you finding yourself keeping busy with on a daily basis now? Just give us a little bit of an idea.
100%. It's that thing where people usually ask you like, what do you want to do? What's the plan? What does that look like? And I'm like, I actually have absolutely no idea. I'm just taking it 6 months at a time. So from the time that I left varsity to this point, which it's been about, I don't know what, 7 years plus minus, I have been basically, I've transitioned from working full time in an NGO to working part time in a consultancy so I can give room for the creativity, to full on freelancer. And with the freelancer, I wrote poetry commissions a lot for corporates. I wrote for, again, the personal spaces online, building my poetry career, doing one woman show performances, collaborating with a bunch of different artists. I freelanced as a copywriter as well, in order to supplement income and also just hone my skills, hone my writing skills for different contexts. And that has all grown to say that I've got an established poetry performance career, if you can put it like that, where I do commissions for all sorts of different kinds of people, organizations. But I also love social entrepreneurship, always have studied a bit further in that direction. So I currently run a brand comms agency, a small pop-up coffee shop in here, Zululand. And I recently just shut down what was a online bookstore, which I absolutely loved, But
My
its
goodness.
season, I know, its season had come and gone. So I think it's probably not the last venture that I'll open and close because I'm always, searching for what's the next thing. And I continue also with the creative consulting wherever I can. Yeah, that's me.
I was on my way to draw a picture of like a three-circle Venn diagram and kind of ask you about the overlap. But when I came to about six circles, I stopped because there's so many facets to it. I just wrote down poets, writing, brand, coffee, social impact, communication. I think I missed three or four. What would you say is the golden thread that connects all of those? That is innately you, I assume. But if you had to put words to the connecting thread, yeah, what would it be?
So in that if I throw back to that statement I said earlier of like people are usually like, so what do you actually want to be? What do you actually want to become? It's like it's this inability to hold on to one thing. So my strategy over the last couple of years has been the rule of three. Always, if everything can be divided into three words, three statements, three anything, three pillars, those kind of hold together what I do. So, for instance, if you go into my Instagram, you'll see the words God, words, and people. If what I do can serve those three categories, I know I'm heading in the right direction, whether it's all three, one of them, or two of the three. But in terms of, and again on my website, and it's something you introduced me with as well, the three sort of hats of poet, of performer, and of entrepreneur. If the things can fit into those buckets, and I know that they're serving the purpose of either gods or words or people, then I know for a fact that I'm heading in the right direction. So those are kind of my golden threads.
That's amazing. And I mean, focus, being not only multi-talented, but also probably multi-dexterous in terms, or I think Marie Forleo describes it as being multi-passionate,
Mm,
multi-passionate about many things, caring about many things. The problem that there are many things that you are potentially interested in. Tell me
mm.
how do you manage focus and how do you manage, focusing on any one thing and giving anything that the time and attention it deserves?
I love that you say that I'm managing it.
How are you
um,
managing it?
It's really like, I mean, I look at my PC screen right now and there's so many tabs open and it feels like my mind is like that. It's a constant switching between tabs, which is that false perception of multitasking that I'm still sort of navigating and I'm still trying to get a handle on. But what has worked has been to say, putting again pillars in place, that these are non-negotiable. These have to happen. I have to have today off. I have to do this on a Sunday. I have to focus on this specific client work every single Wednesday or this specific retainer every Wednesday. All of those kinds of things. Then the rest that kind of happens in and around it, kind of flows in and out. And you also start to learn the rhythm of things. So, for instance, from June to about early December is really busy season when it comes to poetry, writing, and performance. So I
Mm.
know take on less sort of comms work in that hand over some other responsibilities when it comes to the business part of things. Whereas in the start of the year, that's when I can gun it more with desk work and comms work, etc. So those kinds of things you kind of learn the rhythm of, but also you have to just remain as agile as possible without spinning out of control. Yeah.
I love this ideas of focusing on your pillars, knowing that those are the big rocks you have to, those are the things that a friend of mine always says, those are the things that's going to keep me out of jail, solvent, and alive, I
Yes.
guess. So focusing on those, on the three big pillars, and then understanding the rhythm of things, how those repeating patterns work annually, and then being agile. That means a lot. So, I mean, focusing again on getting things done. You've recently shipped a really big project, which I'm super interested in. I want to learn what your learnings was, what your challenges, and maybe some opportunities that it has brought across your radar since then. But talk to us about your book. You finished a book called Love Handles. So I'm excited to hear about that.
The love handles is I sat down during hard lockdown and I was like, I'm pretty sure I've got like a plethora, if that's the right word, or a wealth of words sitting in all my journals over the years, and they are so melodramatic stuff that, I mean, it's the whole series is called Tiny Tales from My 20s. And I gathered all of this stuff and I was like, let's see what themes emerge. And the themes of love, of hope, of now I'm forgetting, woman, black, and God kind of emerged because those are the main themes that I write about. And love handles was the very first one because I thought it's as universal as it gets. Everybody can relate to love more than any of the others. And it's basically a collection of plus minus, I think, 38 different short poems, short and shortish poems,
Mm.
which kind of describe my experience. It's probably the most personal of all of the poems that will make up the series as I go along. Because the aim with it wasn't really self-helpy or inspiring or any of that. It literally was just like dumping my experiences on pages and making it pretty, knowing people will relate, people will get, what they need to get out of it. But it was just doing it for myself to be like, it's not really pretty. There's platonic relationships, there's romantic relationships, there's self-love in there that it's written about. There's a lot of heartbreak, there's a lot of, trying again, all of that stuff. And again, it's such a universal experience. Yeah, so that is my book, Love Handle.
When you put it out into the world the very first time and it came across my feed and I saw the title and I realized the complexity of the pun, I was sold already. It is such a clever title. And you're making me also think of, I think it's Stephen King in his book on writing. He writes about how easy it is to write. I'm not sure if you can relate with this. Maybe you can comment on this, but how easy it is to write because the only thing that you have to do is just sit in front of a blank piece of paper, open a vein and just bleed on the paper. So, I mean, talk to us a little bit about your writing process. Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it frustrating?
I think because it happened by mistake, it was super simple because I was not writing a book. I was just writing
Mm.
in my journals. And I think sometimes when we take away the lights, camera, action, and we don't feel like the world is peering into that moment, and you're not writing with the audience in mind, then it just comes out. But once you start to sit down and say, okay, this is going to be the next published title. I need to make sure, oh gosh, it's like wringing a dry cloth and trying to get some liquid out. It's not great. Um, so yeah.
But isn't that, don't you find it's like that with every creative effort? The most intuitive, natural, seamless, almost effortless creativity comes from authenticity, from who you
Mm,
already are, not from trying to perform something or adhere to some kind of thing out into the world to hit some standard.
100%. And I think it's such a pity that things like art and creativity, in order to earn a living from it, requires some level of fame. I wish it was just a regular career. Like you don't have to be a famous lawyer in order to be a successful one. And fame, I think, really erodes at art and artists. It's such a detractor from it. But unfortunately, that's the way we live. We have to dance in a TikTok video to be known.
I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. All right. Okay, so that is a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you about this creative career building thing. So you are, for all intents and purposes, a young person. You're a South African. You are a creative professional. You both a business creative and an art creative. You're a designer, a writer, a performer. You all those things that we talked about together, building a career out of that, as you said, there's no set path. There's no roadmap that you can follow. There's no guaranteed business. Nothing is going to bring you a pension or a medical aid. All those things are up to you. So building a creative career in South Africa in 2023, talk to us a little bit just about your perspective. What are some of the challenges that it brings? What are some of the things that you think, oh my goodness, if it wasn't for these things, I would have been a millionaire by now, or however you want to be in creative success in South Africa? Share a little bit if you want.
The main thing that's the hardest is being the business, because creativity requires you to pour so much of your mental and your emotional self out into something, and it's exhausting. My goodness, it's absolutely exhausting. And for you to still be the same person who's reconciling your online accounting system and writing emails and it's just but you have to build to be big enough in order to bring other humans on board in order to take that over. And that's such a trial and error process as well, because it needs to be people kind of understand how you work, how you function as a creative, that you need nothing days. It's so hard to explain to a corporate client or even if somebody on retainer with that you need a lot of nothing days. Otherwise, the creativity is going to be good. But because of the way life is set up for 9 to 5, it, that level of that way of being isn't really productive. But and I think also another way is also the lack of information out there as to how one can make this work. And I had the privilege of having friends as freelancers right in the beginning. And just small tips like, okay, figure out what your expenses are and then figure out the kinds of jobs that would be able to pay you enough, but still leave room for the things that actually will bring you no income because they will bring you joy. Things like getting a retirement annuity that is completely separate to a company, or the different medical aids, or what tools are you going to use? Can you share that cost with other freelancers so you're both benefiting from that premium as like a family package or a team package? All of those things, but it takes so much time and networking to be able to kind of gather those resources and that knowledge and trial and error. Um, the single biggest, most complicated, and most difficult thing that I think I still face till today is knowing how to charge for things. There are many different, what you call it, formulas, and people say have set packages and whatever, whatever. But it's also just really difficult to put a price tag on things that are valuable to you. And also, you're actually pricing it based on the value that it's going to bring to the other person or the other company. And they don't always recognize that. So when there's
Yes.
pushback, it's difficult to negotiate around that. And uh, but it's been a trial
That's
and
it.
error. And sorry, go for it, go for it.
No, no, I totally get it. And I mean, sometimes as an artist, yeah, as a creative, but probably more so as an artist, um, doesn't it sometimes feel like you're pricing yourself? And that just adds a complete whole new layer to it. But okay, so with challenges, I think there also comes opportunity. So in the professional creative landscape for us now, what are some of the opportunities and things that you're excited about and looking forward to?
So I recently came back from a trip to Germany and Portugal. Portugal was just holiday. It was lovely. Germany was for work. I performed at a conference called Republica. And I realized just how hungry they are for something new. Like established quote unquote places like the first world or the northern hemisphere, they've got the processes, they've got the systems, everything is fast and fabulous, but they're hungry for substance. I think as Africans, or like this part of the equator, this side of the equator, we have creativity, we have something different, we're vibrant, we're fresh, and it's just about packaging it well that it's accessible. It's just about making sure that I don't know, and kind of riding on the coattails of Africans who have already made it that other side as well, or who have that connection. But there really is a huge opportunity for us to be content creators and creators in any other ways, and combine out what we have as skill sets with what they have. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Now, I can definitely associate with that. Me and my wife went to go visit my sister in the Netherlands, and that was exactly my experience also. All right. I have two more things to actually ask you before we say goodbye. And the one thing is, it's actually two sides of the same coin. And it is about learning, about staying inspired and about staying fresh. One of the big challenges, I think, and dangerous risks for any creative is becoming stale and starting to draw water from old streams. So I think for yourself, how do you learn? How do you stay inspired? What are the things that these are the things I need to frequent to stay excited about what it is that I do? Where do ideas come from in Puno land? Talk to us a little bit about that.
People and nature, and silence are very key for me. People just staying open and curious to people, just what they're about, what makes them tick, what spaces they're flourishing, what they're struggling with. And because as a creator, creative person, whatever, I believe we have a responsibility to respond to the needs of humanity. That's just me. And in
Yes.
order to do that well, you need to know what's happening. You need to have your antenna on. Nature, I feel like we could solve the whole world's problems 3 times over if we just understood the mechanics of how nature works. Because it's regenerative, it supports itself. It's just so beautifully and well designed that if we can understand that, there's so much that we can understand of ourselves and understand the way life works and be able to flow with it and not against it. And
Mm,
then silence, because I think as a creative person, you're a sponge regardless. You're constantly consuming, whether it's information or just the emotions that are in a room. You put a creative at a funeral and a person who's not necessarily that inclined at a funeral. I promise you, they'll walk away two different people. Um,
mm,
Therefore, you need the silence in order to unpack what's actually going on in your mind, to be able to unbox, to label things, to discard things, to sort through what was happening internally for you, because you actually don't know what you picked up along the way in your day. But from a practical point of view, it's to stay engaged with what other poets are, not necessarily what they're doing, just kind of enjoying other people's work. I think that sharpens you, that keeps you on your toes. Again, not in a comparative way, but you're constantly learning from one another.
mm.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
I remember as I wouldn't say professional, as an amateur and an aspiring musician, I was at a point where I couldn't go to any type of music show anymore because I now, in my mind, at least from my perspective, knew how the sausage was made. So I would hear every false note. I would see when the guitar's not probably plugged in. And I thought that was a sign of like musical maturity. I was like, yeah, but now I know. But now, like years later, I'm at a place where I can, even though you still know, you could just enjoy it like for what it is,
Mm,
other people's creativity, and exactly as you said, learn from it, be inspired by it.
mm,
So here's my final question: Is it is shocking. It is shocking that we are already talking about the next generation. Generation, I don't know where they're going to go from Z, but generation, whatever it is. If you had to maybe to frame it like this, if you had to meet yourself, which is also probably a cliched way to look at it, but if you had to meet yourself 20 years ago, or if you had to speak to somebody in your shoes while when you were younger, what would your advice be? What is some of the wisdom that you want to share? Yeah, please
mm.
go ahead.
Don't take too long to let go of things that are not working, especially in your teens and in your 20s. That's the time to experiment and fail. You don't have to try and build a Facebook or an Uber that will come.
Mm,
I would say take financial acumen and just financial literacy very seriously, because having a very business mind and having just good financial habits will set you apart. That's how you avoid not being a struggling artist. It's not about how great your art is. There's tons of amazing artists out there, but they're not doing well because they haven't, again, set those pillars that keep you alive and not starving
mm.
and not in jail. And collaborate as much as you can and learn as much as you can.
Pero I think on that note, it was just such a pleasure and a privilege to spend this time with you. Thanks so much for your time. We're going to put Puna's book and just everything else in the description below. She'll be able to make contact with her, follow Puna on social, make sure to hit on her website and see what she's about. Puna, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.